Hi, my name is Veronica Port, and today I'm going to be building a solar oven out of cardboard boxes, which anybody can use. I became interested in solar ovens when I started looking into preparedness, emergency preparedness, and it was a cost-effective way of cooking if electricity ever went out. So I can cook in the backyard, especially if it's sunny. Unfortunately, in Seattle, it's not always sunny, so but it does work. The solar ovens can go up to 300 degrees, and typically, though, they'll range around the 200, 250 mark. They're very similar to the slow cooker or the crock pot type cooking, where it takes hours to actually cook something, but most everything can be cooked, mostly like soups and chilies and that kind of thing, even some muffins. So it's a great way to actually cook for free, basically, is what it's going to do. So we're going to start with the cardboard boxes. One of the solar ovens, they actually can be made out of boxes, wood boxes. And you can actually use mirrors instead of the aluminum foil. You can also use glass instead of the plastic wrap. But these are very inexpensive items which almost everybody has in their home. So that's why this is an ideal way of making a solar oven. So what we're going to do is I have a couple of boxes that are torn down, and what we're going to do is remove, there's two flaps on each end. What we're going to do is we're going to remove one of the flaps, one side of the flaps, and you can use a straight edge to help you cut straight. We're just going to remove both of these flaps. One of the nice things about the solar oven is that when you're cooking, you can leave it out over the amount of time that you needed to prepare it, because it's not going to burn your food. Unlike an oven, it's just going to be heat. So we're going to put the flaps down. So we're going to be cutting both boxes. We're going to cut the lid off also. But that is up to you whether or not you want to cut it, because we can also just turn the flaps in once the box is put together. I'm going to go ahead and trim the flaps off. Just to make it a cleaner cut. And there again, you can just discard them. And we'll do the other one. Don't want to be cutting anything that shouldn't be cut. Okay, so we're finished with cutting the boxes themselves, and seal it up the same way as the other box. Okay, so now we have two boxes. One box is going to be a little bit smaller than the other, so that the smaller one will fit inside, and we will be putting insulation around it. So back to the little one, which is where you're actually going to be doing the cooking. We want to put a black bottom on the inside of this smaller box, and that's going to help keep the heat in as the temperatures rise within. So you're going to want to measure it and cut out a piece of, this is like the construction paper. It's thicker and it'll help insulate a little bit better. You can also actually use a black paint as long as it's toxic free. So either or is will work. So I'm going to just put this face down on the construction paper. You can also just measure it very carefully. And I'm just going to go ahead and cut this out. And there we have the bottom of the solar oven. So this is the bottom of your box. Now you can either glue it down or you can just leave it. It doesn't really matter because gravity is not going to move it at all. So we have that. Now the next part is we're going to put aluminum foil around the edges. What that's going to do is help the sun reflect onto the pot that you're going to actually be using to cook with. Okay, so now that we've finished the inside of the box with the foil all the way around and the black on the bottom, the boxes that you want to use will be determined by the size of the pot that you're going to use. The ideal pot is a dark colored pot, which also helps to keep the heat in. So whatever size your pot is, make sure that your box will fit appropriately. You don't want a huge box for a little pot because a lot of the heat will dissipate. So try and get it as close as possible for the width and the height. Don't forget that your lid is going to have to be on, so make sure that the height is the same size. If you do have a large box and the aluminum foil isn't quite wide enough, you can use 2 sheets, whatever, to make sure that it's all covered. So don't worry about the size of the box, how high it is, as long as it's covered, you're good to go. So now we're going to put the smaller box inside the big one. And you're going to try and have at least an inch, preferably 2.5 inches between the small box and the big box, because we're going to be putting an insulation in between the 2 boxes to help keep the heat that's in here from escaping outside if it's a little bit on the cool side. These can actually be used in the winter time. As long as you've got the heat from the sun, it can actually keep the heat in with that insulation. You can use any kind of paper. Newspaper, most people have newspaper, so that's usually the ideal thing to use for insulation. So you just take a sheet and just scrunch it up and just start putting it all the way around the inside of the box, or between the 2 boxes. If you want to use gloves, that's good if you have newspaper, because the print can actually get all over your hands. The tighter the scrunching is actually a little bit better, because that'll help to keep the heat in. So you want to make sure that it's nice and tight. Some people actually also use insulation from the insulation that is in a house. Sometimes people use that kind of insulation also. So basically anything, you don't have to use paper. You can use almost anything that will insulate. Try and get those nice big pieces of of newsprint. Now don't worry if your boxes get kind of bent out of shape because they are cardboard. So what you want to do with your solar oven is make sure that all the paper fills up the gap between these two. So that'll keep it nice and insulated. So now we're done with the base of the solar oven. What we need now is to have a lid. And you can use any extra cardboard that you have. It doesn't, as long as it's bigger by roughly about 2 inches wider than your largest box, because then we're going to have to fold it down around the edge to make sure that it fits. So this one, thankfully, is almost the right size. And use your straight edge and your box cutter. So what you can do if you don't have a good size like this one is you can take any size box, use your marker, and mark around the edge, because this will show you where you're going to have to bend it over the edges of the box. Now this shows you where the bottom of the box is, and now we can start cutting around it. And you can just discard the edges again. Okay, discard the edges. Now we're going to have a lid that's a little bit bigger than the exterior box. So once you have the edge around here, we're also going to want to draw another square in the inside of the outside so that it basically fits the size of the interior box. So you can measure it so that it's exact, or I'm just basically going to eyeball it because it's about the width of this straight edge that I have here. Okay, so we've got the size of the exterior box, we've got the size of the interior box. Now the interior box is the part where the sun is going to actually shine into. So once we're finished making the lid, we're actually going to cut this piece a little bit out. If you've ever put together one of those banker boxes, you'll actually have an idea of how this is going to actually work. Okay, so we're going to have two little flaps here. Little flap here. You've got a little flap here and a little flap here. Use your straight edge again, and we're going to bend this side inward where the flap and the outside line are. And we're going to do the same on the other side. every side actually. So now, in order to finish our lid, one of the boxes that is kind of nice to use so that you don't actually have to make this separate lid is the photocopier boxes. If it works for your pot size, and if you had a smaller box inside one of the photocopier boxes, it's actually nice because the lid's already made. So now what we're going to do is we're going to just tape these edges down, and it's going to be a lid. So we take our tape and start taping down the edge of the lid. Oops. Now some of the solar ovens actually, people make them out of wood. If you've got the time, if you know how to do woodworking, you can actually make this a very, very nice solar oven. Okay, so we basically have the lid. Now what we're going to do, because the solar ovens have to have a mirror that reflects the sun into the box, we have to cut a flap out. So we're going to cut 3 sides of the inside of this box. Two short sides and 1 long side. Just pop it in. And what you can do is you can use another straight edge to again try to make that flap edge. So now you have a flap with the hole in the lid. Now you can take back your completed oven, put the lid on. Gosh, I hope it fits. Maybe a little tight because the insulation actually helps keep it nice and tight. So now we have a solar oven, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually put this in foil also, because that's going to be the part that's going to reflect the sun into the box. So we know that the fit is good. So let's take off the lid to make it a little bit easier to put the foil on. Now the foil on this one is just a little bit too short, so we're going to have to go widthwise. Now you want to make sure that the shiny side is going to be reflecting the sun. Put some glue on the inside of the flap. so that it stays down. And I usually have to do this so that it make sure that it stays as flat as possible. So this is what that's going to look like. The exterior, it doesn't really matter because it's not going to reflect, so you can either trim this off or you can just fold it over, whichever your preference. So this is what it's basically going to look like, where the sun is going to come down and put that in. Now, the last piece of the solar oven is to make sure that the heat gets trapped in to the box. So we need to have something covering this hole. Some people, what they do is they'll put a piece of glass there, which is very good because that's a nice solid piece that will keep the heat in. If you don't have an extra piece of glass, what we can do is take your cling wrap or any other kind of plastic that will hold the heat in, and we're going to cover the inside of this with the plastic or the glass if you have it. So we're going to seal this hole up with a cling wrap. So you're going to want to glue, make sure that's roughly the right size. Glue the edges where the cling wrap is going to stay. You can use any kind, mostly the school glue is good. Any kind of non-toxic type of glue is the best to use when you're with doing a solar oven, because any kind of toxicity will leach into any kind of food that you're going to be making. So anything that you use, you want to make sure that it's non-toxic. And that's fairly good. I put the glue all the way around the edge. We're going to put this one as smooth as possible on the inside. Now it doesn't have to go all the way to the edge of the box. We just want to make sure that the opening is covered. So if you don't have it perfectly measured, that's okay. It just has to make sure that it covers the whole opening. So now we have the plastic wrap. So let's take our solar oven and put the lid on. And I think what I'm going to do is actually cut off a little bit of this foil. Because it's a little too large. So this is a solar oven. Try and make this as tight as possible. That's why glass actually works a little bit better, because this isn't totally tight, the cling wrap. And try and get this as smooth as possible. Again, that's why mirror actually works better for this. Glass for this, nice and smooth. So you've got your solar oven. The last thing that you want to do is make sure that you have some kind of something to hold up your lid. So you can use if you have a wire hanger, you can use a wire hanger. Stick one edge of the wire into the lid, stick the other end into the box top. That way, depending on where the sun is coming from, you want to make sure that it's actually directing it. So a wire from the top to the lid will help it stay up without the wind actually blowing your lid around. And that is a solar oven. So I started a meetup group, and it's called Mercury One Puget Sound. We're trying to cover most of the, Western Washington, and one of the interests that we have is doing emergency preparedness. So that is when I became interested and found one of the websites that actually sold solar ovens. Now, typically they can run up to $100, but they're very sturdy, very nice, but not obviously free. So that's when I found that you can actually make one out of cardboard. So I did teach a class at one of our venues for the Mercury One Puget Sound meetup group. I've seen some of the food that has been prepared in a solar oven, and it is actually amazing because depending on your pot size again, you can make rolls, muffins, soups, anything like a slow cooker would do. You can just put it in there. And one of the things to remember too when you're cooking is that it's not going to brown like an oven because it's solar heated. It's just like the crock pot or the slow cooker.